So on behalf of the Public Affairs Forum of India, it's my honor to welcome you all to this session to discuss India's roadmap towards electronics and digital sovereignty. We are privileged to have with us Shri S. Krishnan, who's Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Sir, your leadership in steering India's digital economy comes at a defining moment. The initiatives under your watch, from advancing digital public infrastructure to strengthening cybersecurity, from enabling semiconductor and electronics manufacturing to guiding India's approach to emerging technologies like AI, are shaping India's global positioning in technology and innovation. Secretary Krishnan, as you may be aware, has played a central role in guiding industry through one of the most important policy milestones of recent years. The consultations around India's data protection framework and the approach has been marked by openness and dialogue, ensuring that India's digital economy can grow on the foundation of trust, security, and citizen rights. We understand that the DPDP rules are ready and will be released in the next few days. He's also been a driving force behind the evolution of India's citizens' digital stack, building on the success of Aadhaar, UPI, and DigiLocker to create a future-ready vision where every citizen can access services seamlessly, securely, and with full control over their data. This vision, being crafted under MeitY's leadership, is now a precedent for the world to see. How 1 billion+ people can be empowered through inclusive, scalable, and trusted digital infrastructure will be an important milestone in India's technology trajectory. Equally, he is deeply engaged in shaping India's AI strategy. His guidance has been vital in building an approach that balances innovation with safeguards and creates pathways for the deployment of AI solutions that address India's development priorities. And lastly, his leadership has consistently reminded us that technology policy cannot be built in silos. As I said this morning, it has to be co-created with industry, academia, and civil society. That spirit of collaboration is at the heart of PAFI's own mission, and it's why we are so honored to hear from him today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Shri S. Krishnan, Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and IT. Over to my colleague Arijit to take it forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Chetan. So it's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you with us this evening, Mr. Krishnan. Today, as our nation stands on the crux of accelerating in its digital economic journey, there were 3 pillars we actually wanted your views and guidance on. The first one would be revolving around the digital transformation in sectors like manufacturing, banking, financial institutions, education. The second would cover areas of how best can policies be aligned to strengthen India's position as a global digital capability hub. And the third is in the area of how the government and the industry can partner and deepen its partnership to create a more robust component ecosystem so that the value accrual happens more in India than outside. So these were, we thought, the 3 basic pillars around the framework with which we would seek your views. And if we could start with your thoughts on India's digital transformation in sectors like manufacturing, banking, and education to start with.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank PAFI for having me and accommodating me in a late evening session in this fashion since I'm traveling tomorrow. So thank you very much for doing this. And on the digital transformation itself, I think it's a story which is fairly well known. And, most interestingly, today's Economist carries this article on how India, although it's a little late in the AI space and is not sort of doing the same things that either the United States or China is doing. But it truly has an opportunity to win simply because it could do something else. And this is something which I think we focused on quite a bit, that we have the human resources, we have the people who can make this happen, and at the same time, the opportunity that, and in my conversations with many companies, some of whom are represented here, the point that comes out very frequently is that ultimately the revenue model, even when you see the next digital transformation happen through AI, is in the way that you actually deploy models and in the way that you actually make it work for people. That's where the true revenue models are, and that's where the big opportunities for India lie. One, in the kind of applications that we are able to develop here, and our startups and many of our other even IT companies and others, as to the kind of applications they are able to develop on the back of the various AI models which are available, including, incidentally, hopefully by the end of this year, our own foundational model. Today, our minister actually awarded the next 8 foundational models that we'd be building in India to build on the 4 that we had started earlier, including our sovereign AI foundational model, which is to be built by BharatGen out of IIT Bombay and a collaboration of other academic institutions. So once all of this is available, or even as it becomes available, and we can use even existing open source models to build a series of applications and then deploy those applications both within the country, in sectors like manufacturing, in sectors like education, in sectors like healthcare, in all of these, agriculture, a whole host of logistics, transportation. In each of these sectors, they can be deployed on a more consistent basis and more extensively. And that is where the opportunity lies for India to excel, both in terms of making sure that our aspirational youth find jobs, find ways of adding value, and also in terms of making sure that we contribute and we become leaders in that particular space. And that's the true opportunity which exists. So the next layer of digital transformation, because we've already made a name for ourselves also as the providers of digital public infrastructure. Today, if you see, UPI in India is almost at the same level as Visa in terms of the total volume of transactions handled and in terms of the total value of transactions handled. So when you look at all of that, you realize that you can actually produce low-cost, frugal innovation which sort of gets you there. So we need to do more of that, make DPI and AI work together to produce the next round of transformation, and do it not just for India itself, but do it for the rest of the world, and do it in particular for the global south.
Perfect. And, any thoughts and guidance for the industry on what we can do more in terms of accelerating this digital transformation?
I think the key element there is there are 2 things that industries can do. I think a lot of attention gets spent on, the generative AI models, the larger models, and, how they help. And, a lot of the West's obsession with these models is because they affect the kind of white-collar work and the kind of office-oriented work that most of the people there work on. I mean, a significantly larger proportion of their society works on that. In India, that's a very small proportion. But we still get a little taken in by that narrative. India's narrative is completely different. India's narrative is we don't have those many jobs to lose in that segment, but we have a lot to gain in terms of productivity and a lot to gain in terms of other areas. Yeah, if we are able to see a situation where you actually deploy both models and applications in areas which matter in terms of delivery, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, and so on. So one is adoption. Industry itself adopting some of this technology in order to enhance productivity. 2 is also making sure that units further down the line those who may not be able to actually absorb it in normal circumstances, there I think the government and industry need to work together to make sure it becomes accessible to SMEs and a whole host of others who can then sort of grow with that.
Thank you. Just shifting gears towards the hardware side of things for the moment. Most of the manufacturing that is currently happening is actually, if we are very candid, it's assembly. And the value accrual within the country is fairly minimal. This is something that both the government and the industry has been trying to have a grasp on for a while. And the flow of components, especially the active components which come in, the lion's share of it comes in from our neighboring country. Now, if we are to sort of reduce dependencies, one of the key areas that industry has been struggling with is in terms of growing its own self-capabilities of deepening the component ecosystem. Would love your thoughts, sir, on what would be MeitY's take on how this can be further strengthened and what can industry do more in terms of building a more reliant, self-reliant ecosystem?
Yeah, I think honestly there are two parts to this question. I think the first bit is that I don't think we should beat ourselves too much saying that, what has happened in terms of manufacturing is primarily assembly. And that's for two reasons. The first reason is that that's what helps you establish scale. And I think we have established that at least in the mobile phone sector and in certain other parts of electronics that we now have scale. And scale needs to bring the rest of the ecosystem in. I think that is one thing which we need to realize. And the second important thing is assembly is the most labor-intensive part of the entire manufacturing process. And the jobs which you have generated in electronics assembly are nothing to be scoffed at. The largest factories, the employers of the largest number of people in the country today are electronics assembly units. So let's not beat them up saying you're just doing assembly, because they are employing. I've been to those factories myself. Outside Chennai and Sri Perumbudur, Foxconn's factory employs close to 70,000 people. I mean, that's a scale which we have not reached in other industries yet. So I mean, so let's recognize it for what it is. But having said that, I think it's also important to realize that if what we are playing on is primarily labor arbitrage or the availability of labor, and if the value chain doesn't become deep enough in India, then in the next round of investments which take place, that industry could very easily leave India. So which is why it's important that you need to deepen the value chain and not rely only on the scale, but try and do something else and do something further to bring in more of the component ecosystem into India. These are global value chains. I don't think we should expect that 100% of the entire value of production of electronics goods will be made in India at one go. It is not. It doesn't even happen in China. China is about 60% of electronics manufacture in the world, and even there, components are imported and things are, brought from across different places. So it is a global value chain. What you find is about close to one of these mobile phones, before they are produced, it crosses borders about 70 times is what is estimated. So in that context, I think it's important to realize that we should not even be targeting 100% value addition in the country in this sector. So the target is more modest. Today we are 18 to 20%. How do we take it, double it to 35 to 40%? And that is what the electronic component manufacturing scheme is attempting to do. And I mean, again, there are many of you in this audience whose companies would have bid to be part of the electronics component scheme. It's been extremely encouraging. September 30th is the last date for 3 of the categories. Then we have a further date for the capital goods category. So what we today have is a situation where there is a great deal of interest in manufacturing the components in India as well. They are not as employment intensive, they're more technology intensive, and other elements of it come into it. And once that happens, the value chain in India would deepen, and hopefully that will make sure that industries stay anchored in India for a longer period of time. I think that is the basic objective that we are pursuing. And India also, most importantly and globally, relevant is that given the experience of COVID, given the experience of the geopolitical disruptions that we see, I think you need a reliable and resilient supply chain which has 2 or 3 alternatives built in. And in that sense, India then contributes to becoming part of that resilient and diversified supply chain globally. And I think that's an important global role that India would be fulfilling. So what we are doing is not just for ourselves. It is for ourselves, of course, but I think it's also doing it for greater stability around the world.
One of the areas through which we were from industry side looking at building more capabilities within the country was in terms of joint ventures, both from across our immediate neighbors as well as from longer, geographic areas. One of the areas that we felt was a roadblock to some extent was the conditional press note 3, which comes into effect whenever there is a land border sharing country from where the partner is expected to come. Are there any thoughts within the government about addressing the press note 3, maybe diluting it down, or maybe, could we wish for it to go away within some time? Any thoughts?
See, I think as far as press note 3 is concerned, my ministry is a stakeholder ministry, in the sense that we are one of the industries, one of the ministries which need to follow the set of regulations which are put in by DPIIT and so on. So we represent a particular set of interests, and we believe that some better ways of interpreting provisions of it and some better ways of handling the various provisions of it are important in order to accelerate the process of the value chain manufacture developing in India, particularly of components and otherwise. So that is something that as a ministry we push. Now, the overall decision is taken in government based on a number of other factors. It's not just what one ministry believes or one ministry feels. We have to weigh a number of factors, and there are national security concerns, there are other concerns, there are a process by which relationships normalize, the economic part of it, the political part of it, and there are many other issues which weigh with the government before such a decision is taken. And that would be a comprehensive overall decision where all of these factors will come in. But you can see that there are signs of the political dimension of it changing a bit. We had the Prime Minister visit China after a gap of 7 years. There have been high-level visits exchanged between the two countries in the recent past. So clearly all these will sort of, a step-by-step process hopefully should be in place. There have been relaxations on visas, more visas being granted for tourists, and the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra starting again and so on. So there are some good and positive signs, and it's signs of things which are blowing in the wind, and let's hope that they lead to further developments which are positive.
Absolutely. I think we all have our fingers crossed on that one. I do believe that direct flights also are something which is expected in the immediate future. Yeah. And our next question to you would be, how do you think that policies could be aligned to strengthen India's position further as a capability hub, both in terms of manpower training, in terms of building? How can this be further strengthened?
I believe that, I think we've had some discussions with industry on this over the last year or so. Fundamentally, they are looking at 3 or 4 elements which are important. First and most important is the talent, and how talent continues to be well-trained and available for the kind of jobs we are looking at. And India's, as a country, I think everyone agrees that if there is one place where there's adequate talent, that is India. It's just that you have to find a way that it aggregates quickly. Sometimes what happens is your initial port of call would be possibly Bangalore or something like that, because you believe that's where it's easiest to find talent. But very quickly you realize also that attrition levels are much higher there, and so very quickly you want to sort of diversify within India, because then you want 2 or 3 locations so that you're then insulated against attrition and other factors. So that's one part of what happens. The second, and if you want to insulate against attrition, then you need to look at other possible locations, particularly tier 2, tier 3 cities. So there is a conscious policy now to push towards tier 2, tier 3 cities in terms of developing better infrastructure and making sure that companies are also aware of these opportunities, and so that you can push in that direction. Connectivity, both in terms of physical connectivity, transportation, and also communication. So all of that, as they improve in these locations, then the possibility of heading there really grows. The third element really is that we have to look at the way labor laws are interpreted across the country. There's currently a team under the Cabinet Secretary which is really looking at how the deregulation or that space can be improved. There are some states which are ahead of other states in terms of how they've interpreted labor laws. For instance, Telangana, which is a partner state here, is one of the states which has been fairly advanced. In Karnataka also there are laws which have been changed. Tamil Nadu likewise. In Maharashtra there have been some improvements. Gujarat there have been some improvements. So different states across the country have shown the way in how they interpret these labor laws to make sure that they permit, especially capability centers, etc., require that the Shops and Establishment Act is interpreted in a favorable way. You permit night shifts for women workers. You permit some greater flexibility in the rollover time of the shifts and so on. So the number of these small issues which need to be addressed, and I think ideally everyone will want one law in the country so that it's easy to operate, but we are a federal country and that's the nature of it. And I think it's in some ways in the interest of business also that states differentiate themselves and offer incentives or offer ways in which they can become more attractive. So I think that way of approaching the labor sector reform is important and is a good way forward in this particular area. Then, of course, there are certain taxation-related issues which are sometimes raised by both companies and also associations like NASSCOM and others before us, which we take up with the Ministry of Finance. They are looking at shorter time frames for deciding on advanced pricing agreements. They are looking at the safe harbor provisions being relaxed a little. So those kind of operational provisions sometimes are important, especially when you're looking at engineering R&D. They're looking at clarity in customs regulations in terms of what you're able to import and export out and move from one location to another within the country. So some flexibility in those kind of specific provisions. So all of these are areas which we are attempting to address right now. We are in active consultation with the industry, and these are issues which are being addressed on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. We found in the manufacturing segment for electronics, at least, whenever we've tried to ramp up very rapidly, it works best if we bring in a workforce from countries where such an exercise has already happened, because then the teams already know, they are familiar with the cycles. The recent past has shown countries like Japan, Brazil, China to have had these kind of ramp-ups. Cost-wise, it is slightly more prohibitive to go for a Japan or a Brazil, leaving us with a China as an option. And I think here is where the comment you made about the visas opening up becomes very, very critical. Because if we have to get a workforce that comes in and sort of trains the first batch, and then they leave, and then that batch becomes a sort of a hub of train the trainers, this system works only if the first batch is able to smoothly come in. And I think it's very welcome news from the industry perspective that visas are opening up. It's becoming a smoother process. It's in fact already started getting smoother. Hopefully it will get a crunch in terms of the time period. Any other aspects, sir, that you would like to leave
I
us
think
with?
on this, as a message to industry, I'd also like to leave this thought. While on the one hand, of course, to some extent, you do need visas for people who come and train, they should be people who come and train. And they shouldn't be people who keep coming back again and again. So, I think industry also needs to understand that they have a responsibility in this space. And ultimately, government's policy on all of this is fundamentally about jobs. Whichever way you look at it, all of economic policy which the government is trying to push is fundamentally about making sure that there are more jobs for our people. I think that is something we shouldn't lose sight of. Temporarily, of course, what you say is valid, that, somebody needs to come in, train people here, and then, they take over and move forward. As long as that cycle works, it's good. And I think to some extent, I am aware that cycle has worked, because even in cases where disruption has been attempted by trying to prevent or even calling back workers who've been allowed into the country, because multiple cycles, people have become trained, it's been possible for us to manage that situation as well. So that is one part of it. So that is a responsibility really of industry, saying that you are asking for visas for the right people and you are using it in the manner that it is intended to be used. And as you point out, we have been fairly accommodative on that policy, particularly in the electronic sector. And I think the largest number of visas issued, even in the driest period when very few visas were issued, was in the electronic sector. So to that extent, I think we see that fairly clearly, that it needs to be done, provided it meets these requirements and provided it meets these ground conditions. But quite honestly, I think that is skill which we need to build, and skill that we need to sort of, especially in advanced manufacture. One part of it is really assembly line and assembling various pieces of equipment or devices. But eventually, when we move to areas like semiconductor manufacture and so on, which is really advanced manufacture, very high precision, and we've never done it in the country before. And clearly in that space, we'll have to send out people, get them trained, also bring in people to train our people, and that's something which is going on very actively. So it is a two-way process, and ultimately I think it's in everybody's interest. You come to India because you can do business here and you can manufacture here much more cheaply than you can elsewhere. Yesterday, in fact, somebody was showing me how even in semiconductor manufacture, in fact in display technology manufacture, a display fab, India will be extremely competitive in terms of the costs of manufacture. So we will continue to be competitive there. It's some amount of effort and work will be needed. So people are coming in not to bring labor from all over and sort of keep them here on a sustained basis. They are coming in because we have the human resources, we have the talent, and they are available at a reasonable cost. But in the longer run, I think it's a two-way process, and we need to keep this engagement going.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll hand over to Chetan now.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Krishnan, for your views on a wide-ranging set of issues. And one thing that is really exciting and stands out very clearly is that India is all set to reinforce its credentials as a low-cost, frugal innovation hub. By virtue of the AI foundational model that you said we are in the process of building. And in addition to the existing DPIs, it could be a game changer of sorts. And you also made a reference to the Economist story which has appeared, and which is something which all of us will eagerly absorb later during the course of the week. In addition to this, I thought also your very practical, realistic view around manufacturing is something that we need to be able to relate to, on the need for us to ensure a resilient and diversified supply chain is important. and at the same time ensuring that we continue to be competitive. I think that would be absolutely crucial. And I think your third point on GCCs and this renewed push towards the smaller towns and cities, again, is heartening. And it's something that has been on the anvil for a long, long time, but I guess, it's something that has to be done. With that, I'd like to thank you again. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a very patient, sort of exciting day. Through the day, we have heard from 3 senior union ministers, multiple current and former bureaucrats and industry leaders, and it's clear how everyone is collectively focused towards making the Viksit Bharat 2047 vision a reality. There was also clear recognition during the course of the day on the need for investments in infrastructure as well as far-sighted policy reforms, and also appreciation in the government for the need to balance innovation and regulation. It's also clear that the public policy and corporate affairs functions are at the center of the most important discussions in the country. And tomorrow promises to be another exciting day of interesting topics and stimulating conversations. I look forward to seeing all of you here tomorrow. Thank you. And we have dinner. I'd also like to take the opportunity in presenting to you a book that our founder, Ajay,